Thanksgiving was supposed to be a night of gratitude, a time to gather with loved ones, share a meal, and appreciate what we had. The air was warm with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon spice desserts, and laughter flowed as effortlessly as the wine being poured. Everything seemed perfect, until my wife decided to turn me into the joke of the evening. The conversation had been lighthearted, filled with nostalgic stories and friendly teasing. I was in the middle of a discussion with my brother-in-law when my wife's voice sliced through the room, sharp and deliberate. "Oh, come on," she said, smirking. "You guys should be thankful you have something exciting going on. I can't say the same for what happens in our bedroom." The room fell into a stunned silence for a moment, just long enough for the meaning of her words to settle. Then, scattered chuckles rippled around the table. Some guests hid their amusement behind their glasses, taking slow sips to mask their smirks. Others avoided looking at me altogether, awkwardly shifting in their seats. But the damage was done. My wife had humiliated me, and she knew exactly what she was doing. I felt the heat rise to my face, my grip tightening around my fork. A sharp, bitter taste coated my tongue, not from food, but from the realization that this wasn't just a careless slip of the tongue. This was deliberate, calculated, and, worst of all, familiar. She had done this before, not always as direct, but always in public. A passive-aggressive remark at a family barbecue, a snide comment in front of her friends, a mocking joke at a work gathering. Each time, it chipped away at something inside me, something I convinced myself wasn't worth making a fuss over. But tonight felt different. I didn't react. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flustered. Instead, I took a slow sip of my drink and forced a neutral expression onto my face. The night continued. Conversations resumed, and my wife carried on as if she hadn't just shattered a piece of my dignity in front of everyone. When the guests finally trickled out, and the front door clicked shut behind the last one, silence filled the house. The warmth of the evening was gone, replaced by the cold reality of what had just happened. I stood at the sink, rinsing a plate, replaying her words in my mind, waiting. Maybe she would say something. Maybe she'd offer an awkward apology or try to pass it off as harmless fun. But she didn't. She walked in, humming, gathering glasses like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't still standing there, swallowing the humiliation she had served me along with the Thanksgiving meal. I dried my hands, turned to face her, and finally spoke. "So, that little joke at dinner, was that really necessary?" She barely glanced up. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. Just a joke." I exhaled slowly, nodding. "Right. A joke. Humiliating me in front of our family and friends. That's funny to you?" She scoffed, placing the glasses in the sink. "No one even cared. You're acting like I insulted you in some serious way." Everyone was laughing. It wasn't a big deal. No one cared? Maybe not. But I did. I could have argued. Could have pointed out the pattern. The years of dismissiveness, the way she twisted things to make me seem like the unreasonable one. But I didn't, because something inside me had shifted. She poured herself a glass of wine, completely unbothered. "You're overreacting," she added with a casual shrug. "You always do." There it was, the dismissal, the subtle gaslighting, the quiet manipulation that had kept me in check for years. But not this time. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the satisfaction of another back and forth where she could paint me as the problem. I simply watched her for a moment, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the bed. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror across the room. The man looking back looked tired, worn down, but beneath the exhaustion, something new flickered in his eyes. Resolve. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I didn't wake her. I didn't even glance in her direction as I got dressed and left the bedroom. There was no point in another pointless conversation. She had made it clear how little she cared. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. But instead of heading to my usual routine, coffee, emails, the daily grind, I drove straight to the gym. I hadn't been there in months. Maybe even longer. Life had gotten in the way. Work, responsibilities, and a marriage where I felt like nothing more than an accessory had slowly drained me. But standing outside the gym that morning, I realized something. I had let myself go. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. That was going to change. I stepped inside, signed up for a new membership, and got to work. The first few days were brutal. My muscles ached, my lungs burned, and I felt the weight of every neglected year pressing down on me. But I kept pushing, because this wasn't just about getting in shape. It was about reclaiming something I had lost. With every rep, every drop of sweat, every moment of discomfort, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. And outside the gym, the changes continued. Small things at first, sharper clothes, a better haircut, the way I carry myself. But it wasn't just about appearance. It was about respect. About no longer allowing myself to be diminished. She noticed. Of course she did. And for the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. I didn't wait for her approval. I didn't even acknowledge her reactions. But I noticed them. At first, they were small, barely there. A glance when I came home from the gym, a lingering look when I walked past her. She didn't say much, but I knew she saw the changes. And that was enough for me. I pushed forward, took on new project at work, poured myself into things I once let slide. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, least of all her, but because I needed to remind myself of who I was, who I had let slip away. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, started making plans without seeking her input, without checking if it worked for her schedule. For years, I had molded myself around her needs, moving through life on autopilot, making things easier for her. But now I was doing things for me. One evening, after coming back from the gym, I walked into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. She was at the table, scrolling through her phone, but when she saw me, she set it down and tilted her head. "You've been going to the gym a lot lately," she said, her tone light, too light, but there was something else beneath it. I twisted the cap off my bottle and took a sip. "Yeah." She waited, expecting me to say more. When I didn't, she let out a small, forced laugh. "What brought that on?" I shrugged, leaning against the counter. Felt like it was time for a change. She studied me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, uncertainty. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I just took another sip, nodded, and walked past her, leaving her sitting there, wondering. And that's when it started. Over the next few weeks, I kept moving forward. No explanations. No seeking validation. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. She began watching me more closely, her eyes flicking toward my phone when it buzzed, throwing out casual remarks about how I seemed different. But I wasn't acting different. I was different. I wasn't waiting for her approval anymore. At first, she tried to pretend she didn't care. She brushed it off, as if my changes were temporary. But I could see it was getting to her. One night, as I was getting ready to go out, something I never used to do without checking with her first, she leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Where are you going?" she asked, her tone light but her face tight. "Out." I buttoned my shirt. "With who?" I grabbed my watch, slipping it onto my wrist. "Some friend from work." She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "You never used to go out like this." I met her gaze in the mirror. Yeah, I guess I didn't. Her lips pressed together. She wasn't used to this. Wasn't used to me being unpredictable, always available, always bending to her needs. But now, she was the one feeling unsteady. A few nights later, I was in the living room, responding to messages when she sat beside me. "You've been really busy lately," she said, her voice softer than usual. I nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated. "You know, if something's wrong, you can talk to me." I almost laughed. Now she wanted to talk? After years of dismissing me, brushing off my feelings? Now, when she could feel the shift, when she sensed she was losing her grip, I didn't take the bait. Didn't reassure her. Didn't lie and say everything was fine. I just looked at her for a long moment and then went back to my phone. That silence said more than words ever could. She started trying harder after that. Little things at first. Cooking my favorite meals. Bringing up old memories. casually mentioning places we used to love when things were good, as if nostalgia alone could fix what was broken. One night, she reached for my hand on the couch, something she hadn't done in months, maybe longer. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one chasing. The shift in our dynamic became undeniable. She could feel it just as much as I could. The difference was, I had accepted it. She was still trying to fight it. She started making more effort. Compliments. Sudden texts during the day. Asking when I'd be home. Things she had never cared about before. One evening, as I tied my sneakers to the gym, she leaned against the doorway. "You've really committed to this whole fitness thing," she said. I nodded. "Yeah." A pause. Then, more hesitantly, "Are you doing this for someone?" I looked up at her, and for the first time I saw it. Insecurity. She was trying to figure out if I had already moved on, if there was someone else. I let the silence stretch. Then I stood, grabbed my keys, and said, "I'm doing this for myself." And that was the truth. She didn't like that answer. She wanted reassurance. She wanted to slip back into the comfort of knowing she still had control. But I wasn't giving her that. One night, she went all out, cooked my favorite meal, set the table, lit candles. I took a bite. It was good. It always had been. But I wasn't going to pretend this was some grand romantic gesture. "This is nice," I said, voice neutral. She smiled, relieved. I thought it would be. Then she started talking. About us, about how we could fix things. How we just needed to spend more time together. But the more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't apologizing. She wasn't acknowledging anything. She just wanted to reset, to pretend nothing had changed. And I wasn't interested. Later that night, she reached for my hand again. And again, I let her. But I didn't hold on, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't the same man she had spent years belittling. And I never would be again. Then came the final attempt. One evening, she sat across from me. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just us. Get away for a while." I closed my book. "Why now?" She forced a smile. "I just think we need it." We. But I knew what she meant. She needed it. She needed to believe she could still pull me back into place. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. Her smile faltered. "Why not?" I exhaled. "Because I'm done." The words landed like a hammer between us. She blinked. "Done with what?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Done pretending Thanksgiving was just a joke. Done ignoring the way you've treated me for years. Done being the guy you take for granted." Her face tightened. "So that's it? You're just giving up on us?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You gave up on us a long time ago. The only difference is I finally noticed." She opened her mouth to argue, but then she closed it. Maybe she knew I was right. Maybe she just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. "So what now?" she whispered. I stood. Now I move on. And I did. The divorce was messy. Lawyers, arguments, the whole ordeal. She tried to act indifferent at first. Then came the anger, then the desperation. But it was too late. Walking away wasn't easy. But staying? That would have been worse. Now, I live life on my own terms. No more walking on eggshells. No more being the punchline to someone else's jokes. I built myself back up, not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because I deserve better. And if you're wondering whether reclaiming your self-respect is worth it, let me make it simple. It is. Our story has come to an end. If you made it this far, consider subscribing. It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 videos for you that I know you'll love. Click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.